Pro God, Pro Gun. There's a 2022 movie from director-writer Rennie Perez. This one stars Chase Bloomquist. And this was the final movie that I watched on the Rebellion Flicks kind of streaming site, which was, if you haven't watched any of my previous videos, a kind of mini Netflix, as it's described, that houses Rennie Perez movies that are too controversial to get a distribution deal with a regular kind of movie distributor. I actually was looking for another film of his, a recent one. They didn't have it in the end, but I watched the movies I hadn't seen of Rennie Perez because he is actually one of my favourite B-movie directors. I do enjoy his stylings. And I hadn't seen some of these because, as I say, they are the more controversial ones, you might say. Anyway, so Pro God, Pro Gun. Obviously, with a title like that, you are already kind of getting an idea maybe what this movie is about. But I would say the title actually does this movie somewhat of a disservice, because I actually don't think this is quite as controversial as that name might suggest. This is almost a movie similar to First Blood, kind of meets like a home invasion film. The story takes place in 1974, and a Vietnam vet comes home to visit the family of his fallen friend out in Vietnam to give them like this parting gift, so to speak, that his friend wanted to give to his family. So he meets the father, who is a pastor, and his friend's younger sister. And we learn that this guy was removed from the army under a bit of a cloud. Anyway, at the same time, we have a group of 4 bank robbers who have killed a couple of people on the loose in the area. And these two parties will collide. And now it's up to this vet to try and rescue his friend's family from these killers. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, description of that, it doesn't really sound like it's going to be particularly controversial. Let's talk about what I think works in this movie. I mean, this is classic Rennie Perez stylings here. That kind of stretch of woodland area, you know, that features in all his movies is back, including the downed tree, that I think has more credits than any one of his actors in his movies. But I gotta say, I do enjoy this kind of location shooting, even though it is nearly used in every film. It looks cool. I think it's a great location, and you know, Rennie Perez, and I've said it in pretty much every video, is a very good cinematographer. He's quite good at getting dynamic shots. I think the music actually plays a reasonable part in this movie. I noticed it more so here than in other films. It does try to have a like a 70s feel to it. It's got like a kind of board around it to make it look like an old style TV. It's got the kind of the sort of scratches and film blemishes here, that all done by filters. But at least in this instance, it's actually kind of a movie set in the 70s, which is a critique I've levelled at other films that have done that. Chase Bloomquist, who is featured in a few Rennie Perez movies, I think makes a pretty likeable kind of leading man, you know, square-jawed and all that. And the story, it's not massively action-packed, but it's a reasonable sort of story here. I think, you know, these kind of bank robbers are who kind of show up probably about just before the halfway point. They're kind of a motley crew of sort of types here, but they're kind of like sort of fun characters. They're led by this woman who is been in a few films of Rennie Perez that I've seen. We've got like a kind of almost like a blaxploitation sort of style guy here. So there's some sort of fun sort of characters, I would say. You know, we get a few kind of shootouts in the woods and stuff like that, and there's even like a Mexican standoff style scene towards the end. So, you know, it's for a somewhat kind of low tech, low energy action film. It's watchable, and like I say, so there's comparisons here to First Blood. I'm not sure if it's referencing G.I. Joe. Our main character is called Joe Colton, which was, as far as I'm remembering, the original G.I. Joe character. It could be coincidence, I don't know, but I don't think so, because they do actually reference G.I. Joe. Anyway, I'm sure this is not an official adaptation in any means. Anyway, so yeah, it's a sort of serviceable kind of action film in any respect, and as I say, the political stuff is not as present as maybe some of the other films that are on this Rebellion flick site, despite the title. There is a bit. We do have the kind of the pro-God thing is this family, you know, that belongs to his kind of fallen friend. The father is like a pastor, and our main sort of character, Joe Colton, has lost his faith. And the bank robbers are identified as being atheists, so that's where they get you. And as an atheist, I often go and rob banks, I have to say. So, yeah, I'm there with them. So, you know, there's a bit. Let's talk about what doesn't work. Okay, the story in the main, I think, is, as I say, not too controversial, I would suggest. I think... You know, there's people of faith, and I don't really think it was lecturing you like the majority of these movies that have been on this kind of Rebellion flick site. Apart from one thing, this movie is bookended by scenes that I am assuming were reshoots, and this is the one bit where I feel maybe the kind of the controversy might. It seemed unnecessary to me because the film was fine without these. But we have this kind of these sequences at the beginning of the end where there's like an old people's home, and we are led to believe that this is the now elderly Joe Colton, and there's basically, it kind of basically says that you know, he died and then it's blamed on COVID, and just to kind of inflate the COVID deaths or something like that. I'm thinking, man, it was sort of unnecessary. It felt like a bit shoehorned in there. Plus, it actually kind of tells you what's happening in the film in the main. Didn't need to be there. So that's the first thing. Outside of that, the acting, I've got to be honest with you, was not the strongest in this movie. I think Chase Bloomquist does an okay job, but some of the supporting roles here, not so good, I have to say. The main sort of villain, this woman, bank robber, she's been in a few films. Again, not too bad, but there are other ones here that I feel the acting is a little on the weaker side, if I'm completely honest with you. The movie isn't exactly thrilling, and I say it's somewhat spoiled by this kind of prologue that tells you that the character killed 4 people, and there's 4 bank robbers, and that would, you might say, oh, you're spoiling it. Well, it literally tells you in the beginning of the movie. So you're kind of like, oh, okay, you've just told me what's happened. So why do I even need to watch this film now? It plays slightly different to that, but not much, not by a great deal. So yeah, it's basically a home invasion with a vet, 4 kind of robbers, and it relatively sort of, as I say, action sequences that are not exactly thrilling. One critique that I have of Rene Perez generally is sometimes when he does an action film that involves guns, characters just seem to stand out in the open and fire at each other without really taking cover or anything like that. It's like, you know, they're just standing out in the open like firing a gun, and that's all that the action sequences tend to be. And there is a degree of that in this one, to be honest with you. There's a couple of scenes where they sort of take cover, but it still has that element to it, which is dumb, you know. So it's kind of like a serviceable action film, and as I say, it's not as sort of preachy as maybe some others outside of those sort of bookend sequences, which the film totally, I think, is at its detriment. Had they been taken off, I think this would have been a bit of a better film, to be brutally honest. But as it stands, it's a slightly below average movie. It's not terrible though, it's kind of watchable, but it's not exactly thrilling. Despite it, they're an attempt to have some sort of 70s vibe. The music, although I quite liked it, never really feels like it's a 70s style music, and it just looks a little bit too modern at times, despite some efforts. So I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. Yeah, it's so-so, I guess. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.